You're on.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our special city council meeting done via video conference. Today is Friday, April 10th, 2020. It's approximately 9:32 a.m. Before we begin, I'm just going to ask if we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. Pardon me. Okay. Now I'm going to ask if there's any person of the city council, city manager, or any member of the city staff has any known conflict of interest on any item on the agenda.
None.
No.
None.
Excuse me. Okay, seeing none. Just out of curiosity, who do we have present here? I know Councilor Stuvey's here, Councilor Sorg's here.
Councilor Bencomo here.
Councilor Bencomo, okay, myself. Councilor Flores, Councilor Vasquez, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, I guess they'll be joining us here in just a moment. Okay, so we do have 4 members, including myself. So the first item is going to be the item 2.1, which is resolution Council Bill number 20133, ordinance number 2924. Need a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
I'll second.
Who was the one who moved?
Councilor Abeta Stuvey.
Okay, and the second was?
Gil Sorg.
Yes, okay, good. Okay, so it's moved in second, and we have our city attorney, Rob Cabello, who's going to discuss this.
Good morning. I'm Robert Cabello with the City Attorney's Office. I am presenting a resolution on extending the mayor's emergency proclamation issued on April 7th of an additional 14 days. And just before I start, can everybody see my presentation? Yes, good, just making sure. Okay.
Yes, I can.
I appreciate it. Mayor, Council, on March 11th, the governor issued a state of public health emergency in response to the pandemic crisis. And on April 6th, that was Monday, she extended that with an executive order 2020-022. That's an attachment also to the packet. On March 27th, this council passed the emergency declaration ordinance, which allows the mayor and council to exercise their emergency powers by proclamation. And so moving forward to April 7th, 2020, the mayor issued an emergency proclamation, and it was to run concurrent with the mayor's extension to April 30th with the executive order. And one of the reasons for this was once we established an emergency, it would also gives us a potential to receive reimbursement of funds through FEMA. Again, based for the way we use our money for, again, emergency response to this crisis. Pursuant to the Emergency Declaration Act, 938B, the original proclamation lasts for 3 days. Essentially, it's going to end on noon today. The proposed resolution extends it for another 14 days till noon, April 24th. And again, this extension is to run concurrent with the governor's executive orders extending the public health declaration to during the same time. And with that, I'll go ahead and open up to questions.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Sorg.
could we back up a slide?
Sure.
Extension runs concurrent with Governor Executive Order 2020-022. I don't understand that number.
Okay, Mayor, Councilor Sorg, that number is the number for the executive order. So essentially on March 11th, the governor declared a state of public health emergency.
Okay, I thought it was a date. Never
Oh,
mind.
no, I'm sorry.
It's a year anyway, yeah.
That executive order was 2022-004. And this one on April 6th was an extension of the public health declaration to April 30th. I think it actually ends on May 1st at noon.
Okay, well, then my second question is, what are the intentions of the mayor and the council to do with this extension to the 14 days? What actions?
Okay, so Mayor, Councilor Sword, the purpose of the declaration, again, part of it is to potentially get the FEMA reimbursement funds, but also the declaration encourages.
Rob, we're having trouble hearing you, kind of cutting out once in a while. I don't know if you're talking away from the mic.
Okay, I'll try to move a little closer to the mic here. One of the reasons for it, obviously, of the emergency proclamation is to potentially have reimbursement of FEMA funds for emergency actions. But by reading the proclamation, one of the important things is it's encouraging.
Rob, we're still having a little trouble. I'm sorry. You're clear right about there, and then any other closer, you get a little muffled.
Okay.
Right there's perfect.
Okay. Okay, so the purpose, it really, okay, the purpose is to really have, is to encourage the citizens to follow CDC guidelines regarding things like social distancing, making sure businesses stay closed. The other thing is to make sure they wash their hands. The other thing is to follow state guidelines regarding the public health emergency order. It authorizes the assistant city managers and the interim city manager to act as signatories on behalf of the mayor for any sort of thing that it requires for their signature during this crisis.
Robert, does it include the prohibiting of 5 or more people gathering in close approximation to each other?
Councilor Sword, let me just jump in real quick. I appreciate Rob. I know we're having trouble with his mic. So just a couple things. One, the main thing is it allows us to be able to qualify for reimbursement from FEMA. So in yesterday's mayor's meeting or conference that we have every couple weeks that the governor puts on, and mayors from all over the state, one of the speakers was making sure that the rest of the cities have passed an emergency ordinance because the federal government's going to be looking for that. And there was a couple mayors who were really concerned, even one in our county who hasn't done it yet, and they were looking for a template. So we need to reach out to them because they're going to be looking to see whether or not you pass it. Because if you haven't passed this, you're not going to get reimbursement from the feds. That's the main thing. The second thing is, if you recall, it allows me to spend whatever's needed. And obviously, I'm in conference with the city manager, chief, both chiefs of police if they need it. So that's in event of emergency. But if anything is indicative, is that how I've handled it the last 2 weeks, and that is I'm still bringing it to council. You're not seeing me do something here retroactively. So we're just bringing it forward. And then it also parallels with what the governor had to say as far as what her directive is. About the only thing that we may have added that was different that the governor didn't have is that it allows the city manager access to the funds as well as and directs all city employees to carry out what needs to be carried out during this time of emergency. Does that kind of sum that up a little bit, Rob? If you
That's very good. Thank you very much.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, good. Councilor Bencomo. Oh, wait a minute. Jennifer has her hand up. Jennifer, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mayor. Also, an important aspect of the this proclamation and the extension of it, it makes all of the governor's executive orders enforceable by the city.
Okay, thank you. Enforceable by the city. Okay. Great. And Councilor Bencomo, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been getting a lot of calls about an emergency declaration locally being enforceable as well. Now I don't know, given what Jennifer just said, I thought that the state orders were already enforceable by state police. Well, first, will you answer that? Is that correct or no? Had they not been until the mayor's emergency declaration?
Jennifer, did you hear that? So I think the councilor's question was, had like right now or prior to this passing, the city police could not enforce the governor's directive. And I guess it sounded as though when you said that when we passed this, it allowed the city police to now help enforce that directive. Is that what you were trying to get at?
Yes, it is, Mayor and Council, it is enforceable by municipal police under municipal ordinance. So the city police can enforce state law. They were leaving that to state police because it was an executive order from the state. So it has been enforceable by state police, but now it would be enforceable pursuant to city ordinance.
Okay, and then, so Jennifer, what is the consequence? Like when we talk about enforceable, do you know what I mean?
The maximum penalty is, as with any violation, would be a petty misdemeanor in municipal court.
Okay,
Punishable by up to $500 fine and 90 days in jail. Is that correct, Jennifer?
That's correct.
so I guess my biggest, I understand, I was very much against enforcement early on. I think at this point, public safety is #1 priority and should be the #1 priority. But my concern continues to be us putting, the consequence is us putting people in spaces where there's a lot of people, like a court or a jail. So who ultimately sets that though? Is that the judge or?
I'm sorry, Counselor, what do you mean who sets that?
Who sets that charge, that punishment?
The penalty is within the ordinance. So the maximum penalty is contained within the ordinance. It would be up to the judge to determine what the penalty is and if there was a charge. You have to understand, and I would defer to Chief Gallagher on how these are being enforced. I do not believe that it is the intention to go out and start issuing citations. That's not the priority at this point. I think we have to prioritize for very dangerous situations. I don't know. I will defer to the chief on that. All I will be able to tell you is that the maximum penalty is a petty misdemeanor. It's very rare that anybody serves time.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. I mean, honestly, like as I think about enforcement, and I understand the reasons why it's important at this point, given that there's a lot of people not taking this seriously and putting literal lives at risk. I was thinking about like what happens if we, instead of, fining people, then folks who are not compliant with the stay-at-home order then have to report to volunteer hours at shelters. I'm just really uncomfortable with the idea of fines and jail time.
Counselor, let Chief Gallagher kind of tell you how they've been handling it in the past, and I'm sure it's probably going to continue. So, Chief?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, as Jennifer said, to date, we did not have the authority to enforce the public health order with your proclamation of an emergency. That does give officers the ability to conduct enforcement. As Jennifer said, it's a petty misdemeanor. A couple things on that. Number one, that has to be committed in the officer's presence to take enforcement action. And secondly, there is discretion with any type of enforcement of petty misdemeanors. The officer has discretion whether he or she chooses to enforce it. I would ask you all to consider our primary concern here, which is the now twofold mission of the Las Cruces Police Department, that being visibility and sustainability. What I mean by sustainability is keeping a sufficient number of police officers healthy and on patrol so they can remain visible and able to enforce the more serious crimes that are committing in town. Our concern, if we start to blanketly enforce this petty misdemeanor, will be exposing our officers to situations where they may become infected with the virus and then infect the rest of the staff, putting us in a dangerous staffing position. So yes, we are encouraging voluntary compliance with people. To date, state police have not done any enforcement. They have not done any type of citations for the same reason. So we ask you all to consider that. And also, Councilman Coma makes a good point with regard to, do you want to put people in jail for this, where they'll be in a confined area with other people? And also, to clarify as well, typically they're not going to go to jail right now. All but the most serious criminals are not going to jail. I'd ask you to consider that as well. Would a citation change somebody's behavior? I don't know. Sometimes it does. You all email me a lot of times speeding complaints. We conduct enforcement and it goes away, but then what happens? It comes back. So citation only has a limited ability to change behavior. I think voluntary compliance is still the best way to go for all of us.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious to hear what my colleagues also have to say on this.
Thank you, Councilor. We have Councilor Flores and Councilor Vasquez.
Good morning, everybody. I missed the first 15 minutes because of the new way to join in, and so all I heard was what I started about 6 minutes ago. I was able to hear what was going on, so I pretty much get the gist of what Councilor Bencomo was saying, and it sounds like there's the enforcement issue is a difficult one because it exposes too many people to our officers and staff to contamination. So that's pretty much that's my recap. Did I miss anything else?
I don't think so, Councilor Flores. Basically, the reason for the proclamation was to, one, allow us the opportunity to qualify to receive federal funds when they decide to reimburse cities. I know there's some cities in the state that haven't done this, and they're scrambling to get a template. So I appreciate staff, Jennifer and Rob and all those, and David, for putting this together so that we can qualify for that. Two, it allows us to continue and more importantly, to allow the city to now be able to help enforce what the governor has put out in her directive. And I think that's, and then what you were hearing Chief Gallagher state was, and in answer to Councilor Bencomo's concerns about people being arrested or given a citation, you're probably not going to see that. It's a lot of times the residents comply after the police just say, hey, we need you to, not have this congregation here of people, and then they usually just do what they need to do. And that's kind of where we're at. And it also allows us to access funds quicker. And so that's kind of what the reason for the proclamation, which was issued a couple days ago. It's going to expire at noon today, and that's why it's on the agenda, so it can go another 14 more days. I hope you heard me.
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay, good.
I said thank you, but
okay.
the mute button goes on automatically after.
Oh, okay.
So
No problem.
thank you. So so federal funding.
Reimbursement.
The reimbursement of federal. What is it they'd be funding or reimbursing or?
Well, we're going to have an update here later on today, but that should be some federal monies that were awarded to the city. But I know they've also talked about other types of federal reimbursements to cities.
But what exactly would it be reimbursing?
Well, the stuff that the money that we spent to deal with this pandemic.
So having this citation would allow.
You mean having the proclamation?
Yes, excuse me. Having this proclamation is necessary to tap that federal money?
Well, according to, as I was mentioning, you may not have heard this part. Every week or two, governor has a mayor's teleconference, mayors throughout the state. And one of the speakers was saying, you need to have this if you want to get reimbursed by the feds. And so there were several mayors who were, can you all put your thing on mute? There are several mayors who haven't done this yet. And they were scrambling to see if they could find a template to be able to issue the emergency proclamation.
So the federal funding is specific, or excuse me, the federal reimbursement, the federal monies are contingent on having this kind of a proclamation and this kind of an ordinance?
Yes.
Is that what they said specifically, or
That's what they
it's
said
a general
specifically.
example?
Right. No, they said that specifically. It's if federal monies are going to be allowed to come from the federal government because of an emergency, you have to have an ordinance that you're in an emergency. If you don't have an ordinance that you're in an emergency, why would you get federal monies or reimbursement?
Okay. All right. So then we would have it, and then it would be a petty misdemeanor, and as the chief said, that that police officers would first of all, they'd have to see the breach of that ordinance, and then just like issuing any other citation, like a moving violation, and then that there'd be it would also be discretionary as to whether he would issue a citation. So that would be up to his leadership or directive. Is that the way it would work?
Well, I think it's also that of the individual officer themselves.
Correct. Oh, I see. They would have that discretion.
Sure.
Okay. Well, then it kind of, okay, seems like it would work. Thank you.
It's really no different than moving that aside. There are currently citation ordinances on the books, right? That the city police can enforce. So this is just another. This is really primarily targeted for what we're dealing with right now, and so I mean it's no different. I mean they're the same individuals and such. So.
Okay.
Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning.
Good morning.
So apologize for being late. Also had to create an account to sign in today. Yeah, I just wanted to address some of Councilor Bencomo's comments, some thoughts I've had on this emergency declaration and enforcement in particular. I think we need to use every tool that we have available to promote compliance of the governor's stay-at-home orders and now our local emergency proclamation, because people's lives are on the line. And I think in 2 weeks, right, 3 weeks, we will have seen the results of this enforcement, because typically, there's a lag time between when folks are hospitalized and seriously sick and when when people actually catch this illness. And so I don't believe that we should be giving out tickets, citations, except in those circumstances where large groups of people or specific individuals refuse to comply. And I think in that instance, when folks are putting other people at risk and openly disregard a warning or disregard a command, like to disperse when they are perhaps gathering in more than 5, I think that would be the only time that I would use discretion to actually give a citation out to somebody. But I think the majority of cases, 99.9%, would be local police telling folks, hey, there's too many people at the park, right? Thinking about a place like La Llorona Park on a Saturday afternoon that potentially has 50 to 60 people in and around the river area and the playground. I think that'd be a good place for perhaps our officers to ask folks, maybe not even to leave, but just to spread out, right? To go further down the river and that kind of thing. So I think this is a good thing. I'm glad to hear Chief Gallagher thinks that obviously there's not going to be any need for citations, but it does give them the discretion to at least have that option. And I think that's important, again, because it's not about them, it's about who they potentially infect, and other folks that, these are the same folks that are going to be going to the grocery store, to gas stations, to other places where unknowingly they could spread the disease. So I do support it, do encourage discretion, and I would say that we need to put some information out on that from our PIO or from the police department's PIO, just to let folks know that police, that there is now a new municipal directive given to our police department that this can be enforced. And again, if that just makes people more compliant, I think that's a good thing for us right now. So so do support it, and also do encourage us to use that data that's coming from the Descartes Lab study that's going to tell us where people are congregating, especially in parks and public spaces, to make sure that we're actually patrolling in the areas where there is lots of people in close proximity. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm wondering if we could use that group of UTV riders as a poster saying no gathering, and that is basically, imagine if they didn't want to break up and move. So I appreciate your comments, and that's still, you think that kind of it still bothers me. I get over it in 24 hours, but it still irks me a little bit. Councilor Sword, Councilor Flores. Oh, wait a minute. Chief Gallagher wants to talk. Chief?
Yes, hello again. I just wanted to reiterate what Councilor Vasquez said. That's how we're viewing this, as another tool in our toolbox. And we were waiting for the results of today's meeting to get a little more direction from council, and we will be informing the officers of that this afternoon. In addition, we'll be putting out a press release and information on our social media site regarding our efforts as well, encouraging voluntary compliance, but informing people we do now have the authority to enforce this if, as a last resort, it is necessary. And then one thing with regard to the parks, at our request, the Parks and Rec Department is in the process now of, to the extent possible, closing off all parking areas at city parks to really get the message across. And we understand, especially for Easter, where a lot of people traditionally in Las Cruces will gather at some of these parks, that'll be the case. In addition, the city is going to be funding security guards to be working in those parks as well to disperse people before gatherings can occur. So La Llorona Park is obviously a concern as well, but closing off that parking lot should help us as well. But we will have officers on bicycles and, if possible, motorcycles patrolling those trails as well, requesting voluntary compliance with the order.
Thanks, Chief. We also have David Maestas wants to speak.
Mayor, thank you. I put my hand up at the same time that Chief Gallagher did. Really, I was going to iterate the points that he brought up. Main focus, obviously, is education. We want to help people realize how important the stay-at-home order is and work with them on voluntary compliance. And I was simply going to mention what he did about the efforts that we have in place for security at the parks, to include La Llorona, as well as the closures of those parking lots as well. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, David. Councilor Sword and Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My feelings on this is similar, that for gatherings and all of the other orders that the governor and we have in the city here, not to be punitive, but rather more educated. We need to tell people what's going on. And I know a majority of the people don't hear these things in the city here, that they don't get the newspaper, they don't read it anywhere except some social media. A lot of people don't do social media and so on. So more educated, that if we can be educating people. And we all have gotten the emails that said, well, why can't 2 or 3 of us walk in the park? Well, maybe we can. I think that'd be okay. 2 or 3 people, just so long as it doesn't get 5 or more. And that's something that people need to be educated about.
Counselor, right now the parks are closed. Maybe after the holiday season, I think it might be revisited.
Okay.
But as of this weekend, for sure, please, those parks remain closed.
Yeah, I understand. And in fact, when this is the time that the parks are used the most and people don't get the message, it'd be hard to enforce. I can understand that. So for Chief Gallagher, that's good for him in his force. So yeah, I agree, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I did not see in the packet, though, the extensive packet that we were given, anything about gatherings of 5 or more people, though. Maybe it's someplace else, or maybe we don't have it at all. Can somebody explain that?
Counselor, that's in the governor's orders. So this proclamation just basically parallels the governor's orders.
Okay.
Remember, it used to be 10 people, then she brought it down to 5. And so by us doing this, it just mirrors that. It automatically, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's good for me.
Counselor Bencomo?
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's, oh, am I on mute? No, I'm good.
Yeah.
I appreciate everyone saying, lifting up, using the tools at our disposal, right? Something I've learned from Public Works and from the chief, Lieutenant Daines, is that enforcement always falls at the end, right? Something I learned from Public Works was education and engineering and enforcement when it comes to traffic control. And I feel like it kind of applies here, perhaps not the engineering piece, but definitely certainly the education piece. I think that one of the biggest things missing that, Mr. Mayor, you and all of us need to keep pushing for, and I've talked to Interim City Manager Maestas about this, is data and information. I think that is a huge disservice that us as council, as policymakers, but also our communities, don't have access to information and data about the virus. I know that, there's plenty of information about how dangerous the virus is, about how it spreads. The truth is that we don't have specific data that would, frankly, I think really help people take this seriously here in the city of Las Cruces. We know that we have 44 cases in Doña Ana County. We have no idea where. We don't know where social community spread is. I think that piece of information is a disservice to keep from us as policymakers and from our community members. So I want to keep pushing that the State Department give us that information. I think it's a false argument saying that it would violate HIPAA to tell us where there is spread, and as policymakers, how are we supposed to push for bold policies that help people understand social distancing if we don't have the data to be able to back that up?
Counselor Bencomo, can you kind of zero in specifically what data you're looking for? Because and you touched on it about HIPAA. I think, and I appreciate you announcing that it's really the information we get is from the state, and the state historically has just given counties. They don't even go into the city. They do at least tell you the approximate age. They're in the 20s or 30s or 50s, and sometimes they all say they did have underlying conditions. And I think a lot of times is, on one hand, you're absolutely right. It'd be nice to have that data. Then on the other hand, for the families, I think that are affected, or there's a certain balance there as far as privacy, and obviously they can't disclose the exact age and where they're from because people can start perhaps guessing. So I think they, on that one hand, they try to have that balance there. But can you share with us what specifically, and I'll see what I can do to send up to.
Yeah, I think specifically we need to understand where the hotspots are in the county and in the city. And I don't know if you've seen the information or the data being provided by El Paso County, but it is clear.
I have. Let me real quick. I meant to say that. Right now, the city, we have maybe 4 or 5 zip codes, and they're large. I mean, in 88001, 88005, 12, and 11. And so, I mean, they're going to be brought. Now, El Paso has quite a few of them. we might be able. I'll ask if they can get that. But I'm glad you brought that up because El Paso has, they can spread it out a little bit easier. But I'll ask and see if we can get that.
I think additionally, there's information and data about the virus's trajectory in Doña County, like what are medical experts saying about the spread in the future for our community. If you have that information, the rest of us have not been previewed to that, and certainly not the rest of the community. And I think that that's really vital information for a virus that spreads by contact. I think it's counterintuitive to not give us that information when this virus is literally spread by being in close proximity to each other.
Now, for the record, I do not have that information. Be more than happy to ask the state if they can provide that. So I'll reach out to them. I usually email or text them every few days, so it's not a problem.
Great, and I mean, I think Councilor Vasquez brought up a great tool. I'm curious about what the timeline is on that. Will we, how will us accessing that information work?
Looks like David Maestas wants to jump in real quick, and then I'll go to Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, David?
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to the analytics that Councilor Bencomo is referring to that Councilor Vasquez brought to our attention, we turned in the information that we needed to provide to the company yesterday, and they had let us know that probably by next week sometime we'll start to get the information that allows us to see how people are working and complying with the social distancing requirement. The difference in this program compared to the one we were looking at before, which was Google Analytics, this new program will allow us to zero in on specific locations. So by next week sometime, we're hopeful that we'll be able to start to see what the distancing looks like in certain areas of the city. For example, if we wanted to look at Young Park, we won't be able to do it now for the Easter weekend, but if we had it in place beforehand, we could see what the social distancing looked like at Young Park. So hope that answers that part of the question.
Yes, thank you. And additionally, I'll just say this last thing is that once we understand this data, then we can ensure that we're targeting resources a lot smarter. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Vasquez, then Councilor Sword.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Bencomo. Agree. I think we want to see as much data as we can and be privy to what other municipalities have access to in particular. Make sure we're not missing out on any of that. My understanding is that Presbyterian has come out with a predictive model that is local to New Mexico, county by county, in terms of their predictions of spread in New Mexico that uses a different model than what's available nationally. And so I believe that the city of Albuquerque and maybe the city of Santa Fe, I'm not sure, have received presentations from Presbyterian officials with maps, with predictions that I think we would benefit from. And so I'm not sure who the right contact is at Presbyterian, but what I am hearing is that they have the most updated local model using a variety of different sources within the state for data. And so it'd be great for us to get in contact with somebody at Presbyterian to see if we can't get a briefing from them, maybe at a future city council meeting. That information I got from Senator Heinrich's office, and so they might be the right person to, or the right office to facilitate that meeting. But they do have some data, I think, that we haven't seen.
I'll reach out to Senator Heinrich's office to see if I can get on their list to get information like that. If I had known a little bit earlier, I could have been prepared for today's meeting. So I apologize for that.
That's okay, Mayor. I just heard about that yesterday evening. So, yeah, I think okay, thank you.
Okay. Before I get to Councilor Sorg, I thought there she is. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Gondara wanted to speak. And then Councilor Sorg.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Sorry I was delayed as well. There was a bit of a change in our instructions in terms of how to get on Zoom, but I appreciate Adrian and everybody helping. I Agree with Councilors Bencomo and Vasquez. I think doing this emergency proclamation, giving our law enforcement more, additional tools to assist them as they're, patrolling out there is most important. I like the commentary. It's really difficult being a border community when your neighboring state is doing things that, in terms of collecting data and showing where COVID is present. I think it's really important that I can't help but to feel that if folks knew, A, there was community spread now, and B, exactly where the hot spots are in terms of COVID, people will continue to take it seriously. I know many people are taking it seriously, but there are still folks that are driving around and convening in spots that make it really difficult. And so I would agree that that giving this as part of law enforcement's duty, right, as a tool. And with that, I think education and awareness is really important. I think our communications department has done an excellent job of placing messages on our COVID website, on Channel 20. You will start to see the counselors speaking to important phone numbers and issues that are surrounding our community around child abuse and neglect, preventing domestic violence, just staying home. And so I'd like to see, Mayor, if approved, some sort of PIO plan in terms of what this is going to look out, how frequent are we putting out the message? Is it going to include radio and maybe flyers and electric and the city utilities? I think it's really important to make sure that as many of our entities that we work with and like contractors or nonprofits, that we're getting this information to them so that they can share it with their clients. There are many people out there that are providing still home visiting services that this would be incredibly important to share with them. And so I just wanted to share my support. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, and I apologize for missing you. I thought you had your hand up and then the hand went down.
I did.
Okay, Councilor Sword.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to add to what the others are saying here. The more information that Councilor Bengomo and Councilor Vasquez and Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Gondara has been saying, if we know where this virus is, if we know how it is spread, we can better isolate it, control it. I'm wondering if the Department of Health is doing this or not. Could we inquire if that's the case, if that's what they're working on? There's ways of helping to control the virus, and maybe we'll get over with this a little sooner. I also was wondering about that. Well, I was also wondering if the state and the governor is working on getting more testing done. I think that's nationally what people are saying, that it is going to be very important to control this in the long run too, is to have more testing so that we know where the virus is, and that way better control it again. As far as notifications and spreading information, Mr. Mayor, utilities has a pretty good distribution list. They have ways of notifying all of the utility users in the city here, and either the email or even texting, and of course the flyers and the billing. I hope we can use those methods to spread this information that we're dealing with right now. Other than notes I have, yeah, okay. I have a little note I won't even bother saying because it's obvious. Okay, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if
Councillor,
I could.
I'm sorry, who's that?
Cassandra.
Oh, yes.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to, and I meant to say this earlier. I have some connections at Department of Health locally. Our director, Don Sanchez, has been very instrumental in keeping me abreast of different things. If I have questions, she's been great to reach out to. But they do have epidemiologists and nurse. Her name is Bernadette Guterres. And so to both Councillor Sorg and the rest of the counselors, I think they would be really amenable to coming and presenting to us the data that Councillor Vasquez spoke to in terms of Presbyterian. They are looking at this. They're once the testing occurs, they're doing all the necessary surveillance that it requires. I mean, they're experts at this. They've been doing, this isn't their first time around. They've been doing a lot of disease management and control for years and years. And so I hope, just knowing my 10 years at public health, that and what I know that they do and the relationships that I do have, I think it would be very easy for us to reach out to them. I know how busy and slammed that they are, but I also think that we can get somebody to come and help us sort of give information and the data that's necessary in order for us to make smart decisions.
Good.
Thank you.
Let's share.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councillor Betastubi.
Thank you, Mayor. Most of my questions and concerns have already been brought up, and excuse me. And I just think it's important to really reiterate the fact that we need to have all the tools at our disposal during the next few times, and hopefully we don't see a huge surge or peak in our community, but I think that's kind of wishful thinking in some ways. So we need to be prepared and ready. And one of the greatest ways to do that is to have that communication and have all the data at our disposal beforehand, so we can make those smart decisions in a more proactive function. And that's why I keep asking pretty much the similar questions, but I think it's very necessary for us to know what it's going to look like for our city when these types of surges happen. And we have to realize that we're a resource community for other areas in the South, in New Mexico, and we probably will see patients from other communities. And what does that look like for our own community if we're at peak capacity? We send some of our cases to El Paso, especially things that are neurological, strokes, that sort of stuff. Those cases usually go to El Paso, those high acute care needs. And the conversations have been had with those communities as well, in case they're at capacity. Where do we give out that information for our own community on where they can get service, and that we have a plan and we know what to expect, and to make sure that we kind of have all of our bases covered. So that's one thing that if we can get data like that from anybody, I really would like to see what that looks like, and just make sure that we are planning ahead for those capacities. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I already sent up something to the governor's office to see if we can get that. And I specifically mentioned the Presbyterian plan. And so I appreciate Councillor Vasquez for sharing that with us. Okay, so we're back. We're still on the emergency declaration. And I know we kind of got off on a little tangent there, but that's okay. It's good stuff. So any other further questions on this? Okay, and Councillor Betastubi, did you have a question, or you just didn't put your hand down yet?
I just didn't put my hand down.
Oh, okay, good. All right, so if there's nothing further, Christine, if you'd call the vote, please.
This is on the motion to approve Resolution 20-133. Councilor Abeyta-Stuvey?
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Sorg?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gandara?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay, so next item is 2.3 resolution number 20-134. Need a motion second, please.
Mayor, we're actually on the ordinance.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're on the ordinance. I thought we passed the ordinance.
We just did Resolution 20-133. Then the next one is the ordinance for the procurement code.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know you updated the agenda. Okay, darn it. What number was that?
It's ordinance. Let me get it for you.
32, 29, 24.
Yes. Ordinance 2924. And then the next resolution is 20-134.
Well, that's what I asked for, wasn't it? Resolution 20-134?
We did.
133.
Yes. We did 133.
Yeah, and then I asked for a motion.
And now it's
second on 20-134.
right, but we have the ordinance first.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So ordinance number 2924.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So I need a motion second. I'm sorry, on ordinance number 2924.
So
Okay,
moved.
Vasquez move. Second.
Who made the motion?
Councilor Flores.
Councilor Flores made the motion, second by Councilor Vasquez. Okay. So getting back to that, so who's going to discuss this? Does anyone need any discussion on it? If not, Christine, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor, excuse me. Can I just get some clarification? This is Mayor Pro Tem Gandara.
Yes.
Are we approving the procurement stuff?
No, that's the next item.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No.
Christine, you want to clarify
Yes,
what?
I'll clarify. This one is for the ordinance for the procurement code exemption. The next resolution is for the budget adjustment.
So Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, if you recall, last meeting we had to change things to 74,500 because our ordinance said that anything under 75,000, that was the authority. So by passing this ordinance allows us to go higher amounts quicker.
Okay, I'm also questioning that there's authorized exemptions. Has anything on page 3 of 4 changed on that particular ordinance?
You mean on when we start giving out emergency assistance?
Yes.
Yes. Well, okay. And I'll just deviate real quickly because that's on the next item. But basically,
sure.
yes, that's okay. But basically, remember how you had mentioned about, I think it was you, microloans, and then also the Together Las Cruces or Las Cruces Together Fund from the, so those are on there. And thanks to staff for working up that real quick.
Yes,
and so
yes.
by allowing us, this ordinance allows us to kind of fast track things.
Mayor, so in terms of divvying out that funding and allowing for the exemptions, how are the groups accountable to the city? What things will they need to do in order to ensure that the money is being utilized specifically for this reason?
Okay, let me let Jennifer jump in and kind of share with us what the city was able to work with these nonprofits about. Jennifer?
Mayor and Council, thank you. You'll see that in the ordinance, we did add an exemption, and that was exemption number 21, procurement of services and supplies and construction materials when an emergency exists, as defined by your previous ordinance that you recently passed, your emergency declaration. What that does is it allows us to not have to go through procurement, but we still do have to do the same contracting. We still have to make sure that each organization has a valid contract, that they have clear deliverables. Our contracting will not change. It will remain the same. And fortunately, for a lot of the organizations that we work with, we have current MOUs that are very good MOUs. They have very clear scopes of work and very clear deliverables. So that will not change. That will remain the same.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The other thing is, what if there is an issue with the services themselves in terms of quality or quantity, or not being given a service? Is there like a appeal process in terms of the funding? Do you see what I'm going? Like, once we give the money to these organizations, they have their own appeal process in terms of whether that people are qualifying for a particular service. I guess I just want to make sure there's checks and balances, not only for the city, but for the organizations receiving the funding and for our clients or our constituents. And I'm not sure of that. This is sort of I think, new territory, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, looks like Natalie wants to jump in real quick. Jennifer, Natalie, you want to share with us what you were able to work out with these organizations?
Yes. Just to let you know, again, we do negotiate contracts with each of the agencies. Like Jennifer said, it is a reimbursement contract, so they need to perform those services first, and then they submit some form of request to us to be reimbursed. So there is that checks and balances. Those invoices then go through our usual workflow process. Depending on the dollar amount, that's going to get reviewed by multiple staff members at different levels. So there is that checks and balances. Now, if there was a customer who didn't feel that they were receiving service from the agencies, we do have service or a grievance policy that they can reach out first to the agency and then to the city to seek some sort of resolution, if that's what you were describing, Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Gandara.
Thank you much. I appreciate that.
Someone needs to mute their phone or something. We're getting a lot of static.
Okay. I appreciate that, Natalie. And also, I know this is a lot more money that we're used to processing, and so are there the necessary workforce from the city side to be able to handle this amount of funding and invoicing that is going to be required? There are many of these organizations that are already spending their money, and I want their reimbursement to be swift, that they're not waiting months and months. So do we have enough of the workforce to be able to do that?
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, we do. We will be processing those timely. We have worked out with some agencies to do weekly invoicing and not necessarily our usual monthly invoicing, but I have reached out to every agency that you are looking to fund, and I've pre-negotiated those agreements prior to bringing these to council, because I wanted to give you their confidence and my confidence that they can handle the funding and our requirements prior to you approving the budget adjustments.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much. Again, I continue to be very appreciative of you and all the staff in terms of making this happen. So thank you, Mayor.
Looks like Jennifer and then David wanted to speak. Jennifer, did you have something you wanted to add?
Mayor. I'm sorry. I didn't lower my hand.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. All right, no problem. David, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, sir, Mayor. I wanted to point out that if council would like to hold off on the questions specific to the funding and organizations and what we have in place for them, that will be part of our next item discussion where we bring up the specific organizations and agencies and the funding amount for those. At that point, Natalie can better discuss the contracts, potential contracts that we're working on, and how we would enforce those and seek reimbursement and so on and so forth. For this item, we're looking specifically at the adjustment to the procurement code, which allows us the opportunity to have approvals up to 250,000 rather than having those contractual limits that we did previously at 75,000.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that, Dave. Okay, any other questions on this ordinance? Seeing none, Christine?
This is on the motion to approve ordinance 2924. Councilor Abedisivi?
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Sorg?
And to thank the Mayor Pro Tem for asking the questions you did ask, and I say yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gondeta?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay, now we get to resolution number 20-134. Need a motion second, please.
This is Gabe Vasquez, move to approve.
Towards Councilor Sorg, seconds.
Okay, it's been moved in second, and looks like Natalie's going to be making this presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The resolution before you is a budget adjustment for additional funding for COVID response. Sorry, let me see. As a reminder, there was a public health emergency that the governor declared in March. On April 3rd, council, approved a previous budget adjustment of $1,072,500. COVID-19 does continue to pose a health risk to the Las Cruces community, and there has been a need for additional funding to support the community through this time. Again, the resolution before you is to fund an additional $500,000 in emergency assistance from the TELSHOR Facility Fund. Those monies will be transferred from the TELSHOR Fund to the Healthcare Fund for expenditures. The recommended uses is $150,000 to the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico, an additional $100,000 to families and youth, or FYI, for an expanded meal service, Catholic Charities for a poverty assistance program, Cruces Creatives for the production of emergency PPE, Doniana Communities United for a Los Amigos community connections. That'll be targeting vulnerable populations that are feeling isolated and try and do some peer support match. Economic Development will be funding a microloan technical support, and we'll have more information on that following this slide. And then we are also evaluating the production of hand washing stations across the city or sanitation kits for our homeless population, and as well as possible hotel rooms for first responders. And at this time, I'm going to pass the presentation to Griselda Martinez, who will, Dr. Griselda Martinez, who will discuss the technical assistance for the microloans.
Natalie, before you do that, let's just do this. Let's start with the community partners first, see if there's any questions from council. And then after that, if we can move to the City of Las Cruces, so we can just do that in order, if that's okay with you all.
Yes.
Okay. So on the community partners, the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico, Families and Youth, Catholic Charities, Cruces Creatives, and Doniana Communities United. If you could ask your questions pertaining to that first, please, and then we'll go to the second block. So Councilor Beta Stuvey, Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Natalie. I just wanted to go back to the Doniana Communities United and just get a little bit more of an explanation of the services that is going to be provided with the care.
Councilor Beta Stuvey, I know this was one of the things that Mayor Pro Tem Gondara had talked about, and if you don't mind, I know she's very familiar with it, maybe more so. I don't know. Maybe I'm sure maybe Natalie is as well, but I know that this was Mayor Pro Tem Gondara was very passionate about this. So, Councilor Gondara, would you like to say something about this?
Sorry, Mayor. Sure, I'd like to obviously allow for Ms. Green to do much of the presentation. She's had quite a bit of conversations, I'm sure, with them, and then I will follow if I can.
No problem. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that, Natalie. Go ahead, you're on. Should have just let you stay. I apologize.
No problem. Mr. Mayor, Councilor Abeta Stuvey, the DOCU intends to work with agencies and organizations to identify economically and medically vulnerable lost persons who are isolated or lonely. The Los Amigos program will match pairs to provide peer support, and they'll be able to check in with each other at least 3 times a week, and then they can also refer them to services that they may need. It's really to help improve the mental and physical health of those vulnerable citizens.
Thank you for that. That's all the questions I have for now.
Okay, and next, Mayor Pro Tem Gondara.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate the explanation, Natalie. This is, Mayor, the time banking opportunity that I spoke of. DACA has been doing this for a few years now. Has been really, I think they have a really nice, robust program. I want to say that they have over 300 people that participate in this time banking program. They have an online platform where they register people, and people are basically trained up. They're trying to now move to doing this more remotely, obviously using Zoom and other mechanisms to continue to have meetings. They really provide a service to folks who are otherwise isolated, who that might be our elderly community, our disabled community, our homeless community. And really it's the idea of forming community within our neighborhoods and ensuring that we're checking on our neighbors regularly. And I think this is a great way, a great opportunity to continue to see this program move through with the issues that COVID presents. I'm deeply concerned with people who continue to be isolated, that don't have maybe family or others to look in with. And this is an idea, really a way to share your training and or hobbies or expertise. Again, Carrie has shown me and others the online platform. Mayor, and this is to your idea of adopting a healthcare worker. This is something that they can very easily assist with. Although my question, Natalie, I don't think they asked for just the 9,000. I thought they asked for quite a bit more funding. What was the total there?
Mayor Pro Tem, that's my fault. We're more than welcome to modify this. That amount I put in prior to us passing the ordinance that allows us to change the, to go to a higher amount. I was just trying to get something to them quickly. But now that we changed the ordinance, I think we can go higher, and I'll jump and ask David or Jennifer if that's, or Natalie if that's correct, with the new ordinance that was just passed that allows us to relax some of those rules. So David, you want to jump in real quick? Can we, if we
Sure.
wanted, if the council wanted to modify that 9,500 and go a little bit larger amount, is that possible?
Mayor, councilors, yes, that is possible, and you're exactly correct, Mayor. When the items were first put together, we knew that we had the emergency procurement item coming beforehand, so we weren't too sure, obviously, without that having been passed yet. So we put in the best numbers that we could to start off with. If there is an adjustment that council agrees upon and they want to vote on that adjustment, we can make that change.
I appreciate that. I believe they asked for 21K, Mayor, to include.
I'm sorry, repeat the amount, please. You kind of cut out.
21,000.
21,000, okay.
It was actually a little over 21,000. I don't have the exact amount.
Okay, well, how about just make it 22,000 then?
Yay, that'll be great.
Okay.
Yay, thank you.
I just think with the necessary measures in place and what they're able to do, if people are looking for more information on time banking, you can Google it. Carrie, more than welcome. I hope she was educating all of you in the interim in terms of her platform and how they use it. I've been in many Zoom meetings, a couple at least Zoom meetings with her since the COVID pandemic began. And so it's a really, again, I think a really exciting way to not only bring awareness and educate our community, but also form community. And so I appreciate the vote of confidence and the higher increase. Also with Cruces Creatives, they have also sent a more uniformed and packet of additional information. They also asked Mayor for 21,600. I'm asking that we move to include that amount. That again is for sewn face masks, 3D printed masks, extra cleaning and sanitation supplies, and miscellaneous items that they will need to be able to continue to develop or produce, these particular items.
Okay.
At this point, Mayor?
I'm sorry, did you make that as a motion or you were just wanting after discussion, then you're going to come back and make that?
After discussion, I can make a motion.
We have councilors Bencomo. Yeah, Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Green, for that information and for all the work you've been doing in connecting with folks. Perhaps Mr. Mayor or Natalie or maybe Interim City Manager Maestas can you help me understand how we are able to provide right now the Together Las Cruces Community the Community Foundation with this amount of money, but we were not able to do that with Community Action Agency a week ago? Is it because of the vote we just took, or am I missing something?
I thought we gave money to Community Action Agency last week.
74.9.
74.5, I think.
Yeah.
So you wanted to give more?
Yes, I think, and I was definitely disappointed that I didn't see them on the list again. I think that they're providing a really great direct service to the community in need right now. But I guess I'm curious also, yes, I would like to see them on the list again.
Yeah, that was my doing, and again, I apologize. So how about if we get through these, and then before we...
Oh. Am I frozen or is it the mayor?
We go to the next, if we can, yeah, because I don't know. Well, let me get Jennifer some clarification here. So Jennifer, since Community Action Agency isn't on the list right now, can we put that on there and grant funding? Is that something we could do, or does that have to be listed for the following council meeting?
Mayor and council, I will refer to Natalie to talk about this, but as long as it's the amount of funding, I think that the ordinance that you just passed allows us to go into, to enter into agreements with these organizations for a particular amount of funding. To get back to Councilor Bencomo, the reason why it had to stay at 74.9 was because our procurement code prohibited more than that. What you just passed allows a higher amount.
Okay.
Okay,
Natalie,
so
I don't know, Natalie, did you want to add anything? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, Jennifer is correct. We currently have an agreement with them. Again, for the last week, it was the sense of expediency, and we wanted to negotiate contracts below the cap. Now that we have the ordinance, we can negotiate contracts above that cap. So they have current funding of, with the amount given last week of 98,000, and your ordinance caps it at 250. So it would have to be a number between that 98 and 250 that you would award if you chose to. Again, the resolution is just to approve a budget adjustment. So really, as long as you increase the budget adjustment, we can negotiate those dollar amounts with the agencies that you determine.
Okay.
Natalie, excuse me, just clarification. Currently, it's at 98,000. The maximum we can do is 250. Is that what you said?
Correct, because we amended their past contract, and that contract, original contract was for 24.3. So once you add your 74.5, we were at 98.8.
Okay.
So
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Councilor Bencomo.
That's okay. So am I understanding right that we could include CAA in here then today?
Yes, looks like.
Okay. Okay, I will make that motion later.
Yeah.
I have one more question though. Natalie, can you describe for the Community Action Agency, it's my understanding that there will be a new application process. Can you describe that, what that will look like for people applying for those funds? I want to make sure that they're inclusive of all Las Cruces.
Community Foundation.
I'm sorry, the Community Foundation, yes.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, we are working through that now. The application will have to include an income sort of verification. Will allow people to self-certify their income, but they need to fall within that threshold. There's also some additional demographic information that we track around if they fall into like a presumed benefit category, so age, gender, ethnicity, some racial demographics. We're not using that to disqualify clients at all. It's just a tracking mechanism, but they are also including some questions off our own internal client verification form. So they've just modified their application to track those additional items.
So it's my understanding that currently there is a requirement for the funding that you have to have applied for unemployment due to COVID-19. My biggest concern with that is that if you're undocumented, you don't qualify for unemployment, so you wouldn't have access to those funds. Are we getting rid of that? Is that changing?
I believe it's a question on the application, but I'm not aware that that's being used as a disqualifying factor. I will work that out with Tara Winter, but again, the questions are mostly going to revolve around the total household income. Do they fall within our if it's housing related, 120% of area median income. If it's non-housing related expenses, it's going to be 100% of median income. So
I read an email from Ms. Winters that said they had rejected some applications because folks had not applied for unemployment. So that's a huge concern to me. I think private donors can exclude whoever they like. I don't think public dollars should do that. And whatever public dollars that we are putting out into our community should remain inclusive and should not include barriers like that in order to access funds. So I'm pretty concerned about this.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, the city does have a policy on serving non-national citizens. All this funding would qualify as an exception to that directive. I did just get a message from Ms. Winters, and she is saying that it is a question on the application, but it is not a qualifier. And that question was due to their private donors, so it would not be a qualifier for city funding. Really,
Great.
The only qualifier besides income is going to be that they reside within city limits. We do have the expectation that our funding go to residents within the proper city limits.
Thank you so much for that, Natalie. That makes me feel a whole lot better. I appreciate that. Those are all my questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, well, yes, David.
Natalie and I, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, Natalie and I had a discussion with Ms. Winter last week. One other qualifying issue that they had on previously was they had people who claimed that they were unemployed and worked for certain companies, and they were unable to verify that they had previously worked with those companies. So it was really falsifying an application. So they had disqualified those two people on those grounds because they weren't honest in their application, and they previously had not been working, or who they claimed they were not working with for is who they weren't working with, or who they indicated on their application. But we'll work through those finer nuances to ensure we can serve as many people as possible.
And it looks like David Maestas wants to speak. Thanks, David.
You bet. Mayor, I had my hand up, but when Mr. Dallahan jumped in, he went ahead and took care of what I was going to pass on, so I can get my hand down now. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, Councilor Vasquez, I think, was wanting to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I just want to reiterate my support for the request from both Councilor Bencomo and Councilor Gandara. I did have a question on the Doñana Communities United Time Bank kind of grant. I could see how we could measure the results for all of these other different monies that we are distributing to different community partners, but not sure exactly how with Doñana Communities United we track success, we track progress, we track that the city's money is being well spent. So is there anything in this contract that would essentially let us say, yes, this was a good investment and X amount of people were served? Is that a discussion that we have had with them?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, we are working on that scope of work. We will track the number of matches and the type of matches that they are performing. We'll also track the point of contact, the number of point of contacts those matches have with each other. And again, we'll work through those finer nuances of the contract. All our contracts are performance-based, so there is going to be some quantity-based objectives, but there is also going to be, of course, some quality-based objectives. And we'll work through that process. All our scopes have an objective, activities, and again, goals that they are trying to achieve. So there's not a contract that we are going to execute without those.
Thank you, Natalie. That makes me feel a lot better because in thinking of taxpayer money or TELSHOR fund money going to community foundation, certainly the amount of people who receive assistance, financial assistance would be an easy way to track the investment from the city, right, who qualify for that. Same with the expanded meal service at FII, how many meals are going out, how many members of our community are receiving them, how many members has Catholic Charities assisted in our community, and how many masks have been created by Cruces Creatives. But I don't know what the particular measures of progress or of success would be for the COVID-19 connection. So I am confident that they will come up with a good system, but it gives me more confidence, Natalie, knowing that you will assist in helping to draft that performance-based contract, and would like to see that a report on that right before we do increase potentially more funds in the future, since we've never done this before. I think the amount that Councilor Gandara has suggested is appropriate for now, and if it works, then we can think about more later. But I would like to see some performance or at least some results out of that particular program before giving more money. So thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sorg?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. I'm getting confused here. We got a lot of things going on here. And my question to start with is the funding we approved last week. There was some money that went to the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico, right? And it was like 74,000.
No, we didn't do that. Because at that time we hadn't worked that out yet, and that's what Natalie was doing. That's why we brought it forward this time.
Okay, so it was on the list though to start with, right? Get off.
Well, there was hoping to get. That was one of the ideas that Council Bencomo, Vasquez, and Beta Stuvie, I think, brought forth. I believe
It was their list.
I think so. I believe so.
Okay, was that right, Councilor Vasquez? Was that your list that had Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that explains it then. I understand now. All right, that's all we need to clear up for right now. I have more later as we get to the City of Las Cruces. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so if there's nothing further, let's stick to the amendments on the community partners. And so I'm going to go back to Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, who I believe wants to increase funding for Cruces Creatives and Doña Ana Communities United. And I'm going to guess, Christine, you're going to want those individual amendments, correct?
There, what we can do is wait till the end and just change the entire budget adjustment amount like we did with the last resolution. So
Okay,
that we're not voting on each, yeah.
You don't need them? Okay.
Right, we just need an amendment to the total amount and we don't have to vote on each individual.
Okay. Starting to lighten up now. Okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, so let's go to the next section, City of Las Cruces, and this will be, oh, yes, Councilor Flores.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify that the proposal that DACU submitted was for the PAIR project, you know, the buddy system. It wasn't necessarily for anything else at this point. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I think that Carrie Bachman has had that conversation with Natalie Green.
Right, and we have it here, Los Amigos Connections, basically, okay. AKA the Time Bank.
Well, I'm not sure it even falls within the Time Bank. Do you know anything about that, Natalie? Ms. Green?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, it is similar to the Time Bank, but it is going to be specific to COVID response. So again, all these projects are specific to emergency COVID response.
Yes, and my understanding, and I might be wrong, because even if I'm wrong, it wouldn't have an impact on what Ms. Natalie Green just said, is that it isn't going to be it'll be someone who will maybe be a one-time person who is contacted, and that person doesn't necessarily have to be a part of that time bank.
Yeah. And I apologize, I probably misspoke. That was the original intent, but you know, of course, our staff will, you know, clarify it and make it so that it fits what that qualifies. And if that's the case, I understand. Yes,
and I just wanted to make sure, because this would all be part of the impact it's having on people who are isolated as a result of COVID, who don't have cars, who aren't able to get out, So I just wanted, just for the record, for the public to understand. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you.
Okay, great. So now we're going to go to the second part, and that's the City of Las Cruces. And I interrupted Dr. Griselda Martinez, and she was going to talk about the microloan technical support.
Yes, good morning, Mayor, City Council. It is my honor to have the opportunity to talk to you this morning Before we go into the technical assistance component for microlending, I'd like to update you with things that we have put in place given the current situation. We have been making an effort to continue to serve our customers, including tourists for the future, including transitioning Earth Day celebration to online, and also working with our other departments to continue the services. Within the items specific to support services, we started on March 19th a series of email blasts to all business registration emails with the intent to connect them to the resources being made available by state and federal agencies as well as other local initiatives. So up to date, we have sent 7 different emails with different information, including information from the Economic Development Department for New Mexico, Workforce Solutions for Self-Employment Support, Buy Local by New Mexico program, Business Sprint from Arrowhead Center, and others. We also launched a local Buy Local campaign. Radio and print started this week, and we will gather success stories to share through social media and continue to connect resources to those in need. I believe your vision to create the Economic Development Department 4 years ago and bring economic development to the forefront of this community, it's now more important than ever because of the current situation and the impact to businesses and their employees. So we have also reached out to community partners, including Mavita, the chambers, Workforce Solutions locally and at the state level, Doña Ana County, City and County of El Paso and Albuquerque to share information, but also brainstorm on potential ways to collaborate. So that's a little bit of background information to what we have put in motion. I believe that our response to continue to support our community and specifically to the business community is going to continue to be crucial. And we understand that eliminating the negative effects will not be possible, but at least to help decrease the degree of impact. So that's where we're coming from. A few months ago, we had identified a gap for small businesses that may have some challenges accessing capital. And with the current situation, we accelerated the process that we were in motion for an RFP, and we turned it into funding for technical assistance specific to helping small businesses owners who are socially and economically disadvantaged and who usually have challenges to access to capital in the traditional bankable way. And so we are looking to do a partnership with a community development financial institution that serves already the local community to reach out to businesses and help them with technical assistance in a general way for them to be more competitive as a small business, but also in light of this current crisis. We're also aiming to use this partner to connect those businesses to the resources available from, for instance, Small Business Administration, that they have loans and that the process may be confusing or hard to follow, and for this partner to help businesses troubleshoot challenges that businesses may be facing right now. So the goal is to focus in businesses located within the city limits who have an active registration, who are independently owned and operated, so no franchises will be excluded, and then small businesses as defined as a small business administration. Can you advance, Natalie, please? So the technical assistance will include several ways to reach out to businesses, including one-on-ones in a virtual way, and also other forms of consultation. The goal is for these businesses to be competitive and loan ready, and not only to get to that point, but also to remain financially strong to be able to pay back those loans and accomplish growth from their business. The initial thought was to help business growth. Right now, we're focusing more on helping businesses stay in business, and this is one big shift in the approach we had before the current situation, and making sure that we are working within the context right now. The conversion rate from the technical assistance into loans, it's going to be of great importance, and the range of the loans will be somewhere between 2,000 and 50,000. And 50,000 depending on the need of the business. And the loans will be specifically worked out between the CDFI partnership and the loan and the business owner. So the city will not have access to any information pertaining to a specific business, and we will not be managing the loans either. Natalie, can you advance, please? I think you skipped to one. Can you go back to the performance measures? So as Natalie was talking before, in terms of the contracting, we are following the model of performance contracting as we have with other vendors. And so we are framing the deliverables in terms of number of hours served with businesses, number of businesses consulted, and then also the conversion rate that will lead to access to capital. So that's in a nutshell what we're working on. We're also exploring other options that we may be able to deploy for the business community, and also to make sure that we are focusing our efforts very strategically in minimizing the degree of negative impact given the current situation.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Okay, so someone mute there. Okay, have Councilor Vasquez, Councilor Sword.
Sorry about that, Mayor. I forgot to lower my hand. Thank you.
Oh, okay, Councilor Sword.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little surprised that this is coming up here. The first question I have is, who asked for this funding?
This was something that was brought up at our last meeting. I don't know if you recall that or not, Councilor Sword. That was discussed about the microloans, and what brought that on was earlier the week prior, the city of Albuquerque had advertised that they were giving away $5,000 grants to various businesses, to 100 businesses, and so Mayor Pro Tem Gondara asked, how come we couldn't do that? And so staff went to work, and I think this is what evolved part of that microloan technical support, because I just didn't see how Albuquerque could do that without violating the anti-donation clause. And it turns out that it looks like they have their own foundation, like the Las Cruces Public Schools has their own foundation, like Memorial Medical used to have their own foundation. We're now using the Southern New Mexico Foundation to fund the Together Las Cruces Fund, but we don't have our actual own foundation. But I think that's how that's what brought this conversation up.
Another question I have is, what are we defining as socially and economic disadvantage or underrepresented backgrounds? Can you give me examples of that?
Yes, Mayor, Councilor Sword. Usually non-bankable business owners are minority-owned business, whether it's by race or by gender, and usually their businesses are less profitable than their competitors. So it's those type of businesses are usually those that cannot access a traditional banking system, such as a regular bank, and so the reason why we're going through a CDFI, the Community Development Financial Institution, is because those institutions were created specifically to channel additional resources at different groups of people who may not be from the traditional perspective.
I'm very aware of discrimination when it comes to bank loans. My son-in-law was an officer, loan officer, right here in Las Cruces for a little while, and he would come home and complain about just that issue. It happened to be for home loans, but I'm sure it applies to businesses too. Can you explain why, or should we decide who are the winners and losers when it comes to a business?
So, Mayor, Councilor Sorg, we will not be choosing winners or losers. This is an additional support to those business owners who may be facing an additional barrier to access capital.
Yeah.
So the goal is to make the connection between resources to the needs. And so working with the partner CDFI agency, they will be working with businesses locally owned for technical assistance to ensure that they understand what opportunities they have as a business, and that technical assistance will put them in a better place, in a stronger position as a business that would then lead into access to capital. So
I understand, yeah.
So strengthening
why is this coming up now? Why wouldn't we be doing this long before now?
So as I mentioned before, we identified the gap a few months ago and started working on ways to put something together. And because of prior to the exception in the P code, we were considering and doing a higher amount, and we were following the procurement process through the RFP and going through SAC and all these different items that we needed to do. With this crisis, we needed to act quickly, and we decreased the amount to 74.5, which is what we're bringing to you today. And that's why this is right now in motion to identify opportunities that can be put in place to minimize this crisis. But we were working towards having it. Just right now, the needs are different and the opportunities also are different. For instance, right now, the Small Business Administration has a loan program that has to be processed through a banking institution. So this would be a great way, a mechanism for those small businesses to be able to process those loan requests.
I'm so surprised that a federally funded program through the Small Business Administration would show any kind of discrimination against anybody. So if these businesses can't get a loan from there, would it be for some other reason? And then are we ready and doing the right thing?
Mayor, Councilor,
I'm having a hard time explaining this, but do you see where I'm going?
Yes. Mayor, Councilor Sword, one key component, if you read the what we're requesting is technical assistance, and this will focus on strengthening the business to be able to be loan ready. If we were to bring money, we would be setting the businesses for failure with additional debt. We want to make sure that they are well prepared to be able to be loan ready and to be able to pay back. So the technical assistance component is crucial. Yeah. This is going to be educational, and it's going to be very working hand in hand with the business for them to understand their opportunities and growth.
Okay. Now this sounds like economic gardening, which I'm all in favor of. And,
correct.
Go with that all you can. Do as much as you can there. But my last little comment is that, is this funding source for this project properly coming from the TELSHOR funds, Mr. Mayor? Since how is it related to health and indigent and so forth? If we fund this, shouldn't we be funding it with another source?
Well, Councilor, if you recall, we passed a resolution to allow us to expand the opportunities. And so, when you stop and think about it, one of the criteria was not only the ill or the sick, but also the indigent. And so I think, I'm not saying that this is for the indigent, but we're looking at income related. And I think what Dr. Griselda Martinez was talking about is for those that may be disenfranchised out, this is going to hopefully be used for them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Gondara.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for all your work. I know you've been working on this for some time. I think this is an excellent way of assisting our businesses currently as we move through this kind of uncharted territory, correct? I know of 2 or 3 businesses that were struggling to get loans, and you and I have talked quite a bit about this as it relates to the various reasons why they were struggling. I think some of the technical assistance is so much needed. I think many of our business or prospective business partners are really wanting sort of someone to help sort of lead them or guide them through this process. And I know this is an excellent way of doing this, and I can't think of a better way at this point in time to assist our small businesses that I know that are out there currently struggling to make their loans or to even just start a process. And I think it's important for us to be visionary about this. And so I appreciate it, Dr. Martinez.
Thank you.
I also have some questions about some additional funding opportunities. Do you want me to wait to include those?
Well, go ahead and talk what additional things you want to talk about, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I'd like to add $7,500 to Fish and Loaves. Last week we gave them funding for boxes to help feed the elderly. They reached out to me earlier in the week and asked that we fund them for the next 3 months. And then I know that Habitat for Humanity asked for $60,000. They had a worksheet with all the various items that they continue to lose out. Habitat for Humanity has been an excellent resource to help people who otherwise wouldn't have opportunities to build their home, and I think they're struggling. So I'm not sure if this will fit here, but they've asked for to help pay for things given that their restore is closed. Administratively, they're struggling because of the mortgage payments that many of them who are now unemployed are falling behind. I'm not sure if Natalie has had an opportunity to speak to Ms. Candace Butler about this, but she has sent a couple of emails to us. I also, again, have felt really strongly about a stimulus package that would continue to assist not only our community, but also our GRT, where much of our GRT comes from construction. And so I wondered if there was a way to have this conversation quickly to assist them.
And what was that amount again, Mayor Pro Tem?
$60,000 is what she asked for.
Okay. Well, I think we could always include it, and for some reason, until staff, if it works, great, good, and if not, they can work and see what they need to do to make it happen. But it's better to have it on there and approved and available as opposed to waiting to come back. David, you have something you want to say?
Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Mayor and councilors, I just wanted to reiterate what you said, Mayor. That is a great point. If we feel that we want to look into that, it's better to approve the budget now. If we go through the process and find out that it does not work, then we can always report back on what took place. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Any questions? Oh, let's see, Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, so we're preliminarily approving some budget items to make it, but they're subject to approval or review by, say, Natalie Green, who would have to touch.
Well, primarily the Habitat for Humanity. I mean,
Yeah.
I know we have a working relationship with them.
Yes.
The fish and loaves doesn't seem to be a problem, but you know, just in case.
No, okay, because is that something that we'll have a report on next week, or how are we going to be meeting once a week on these budget adjustments, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, well, I was going to schedule one for April 17th, which is 1 week from today, and make that optional just in case something was to come up during the week. And you know, but I think this is a really healthy start. What's being proposed, and as long as it passes, but you never know. There may be some other needs, and so if we can at least have it advertised, but we could also cancel it if we don't.
Right. Well, I think my concern is similar to that of Councilor Sword, and I think that Mayor Pro Tem Gandara also prefaced her statement by not being too sure about the Habitat for Humanity, but all of these have to be seen through the lens of the COVID-19 being the factor which initiates all this funding. So who does that? Does Natalie Green do that? Does our city attorney do that? Does David Maestas do that? Does budget do that?
All of the above.
Okay. Well, just so long as all of it is taken care of, because you know, I certainly don't want to make it look like we're not being vigilant about how COVID-19 money, TELSHOR money, is being allocated. I'm very concerned about that.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilor Bencomo, Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also wanted to make a recommendation for funding for CAA specifically, but are we done with the presentation? I don't want to get ahead of myself.
I think so. Nobody had any concerns about the last two, so now we're just kind of taking some additional requests on things.
Okay, great. Well, I would like to request the maximum for Community Action Agency, or at least 249,000.
Oh yeah, I've got that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so who else? Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm supportive of these requests. I do also just want to express some reservation and some caution to the decision-making process on this. I think TELSHOR funds, city funds should be prioritized in two ways. One is to meet the need that's greatest in our community that helps people in the most dire of situations right now. And so I see that as like food, rental assistance, transportation, fill in the gaps where folks can't get the needed services that they need just to live because of a loss of employment. There's going to be a lot of nonprofits that are going to struggle throughout this process. There's going to be a lot of businesses that struggle throughout this process. And that pain will be shared equally across our community and communities throughout New Mexico, and for that, communities across this country. And so I can see that following this meeting, we're going to get way more requests from other nonprofit organizations and from other folks who are going to need assistance. And so I would just want to encourage us to look at these dollars going to the people who are most impacted and finding solutions for them to stay afloat economically, to me, is my priority. And so I think the Community Foundation Fund does that. The Community Action Agency does that. All the food assistance programs that we're giving to do that. If we start varying from that mission, I think we potentially miss out on funding those things that we really need. And so could $40,000 or $50,000 that would go to Habitat for Humanity be better spent on rent assistance for people right now, like who are in actual dire need? I don't know, because I haven't seen the proposal from Habitat for Humanity. So I haven't seen it, and so I'm not going to comment on that particular proposal. They do provide an amazing service to our community. I'm not going to deny that. I've been part of their events, and I want them to make sure. I want to make sure that they can certainly continue to serve our community. But again, I just want to make sure that these funds are going to where they're most needed, and where we can fill in the gaps that the state and federal government also won't be able to provide or can't provide in a timely manner. So just kind of want to keep our eyes on the prize in that respect, and wanted to mention that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, well, thank you, Councilor. And again, as mentioned, if we pass it, doesn't mean we'll necessarily just write them a check tomorrow. Staff's going to go through there, see exactly what it's going to be, and perhaps if only a fraction of it qualifies, then they'll come back and report that to us.
Mayor, if I may.
I'm sorry, who is this?
It's Barbara DeLeon.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barbara. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, I just wanted to weigh in with respect to the funding source. So as the Mayor pointed out, the microloan program in particular had been raised previously, and so we did include it in the discussion with this budget adjustment. However, we agree with the concerns of Council with respect to the utilization of the TELSHOR funds for the emergency procurement ordinance, which you just passed. We defined that emergency to be limited to the public health, threat to public health, welfare, or safety. So keeping that in mind and this discussion of the use of the TELSHOR funds, it makes sense to have that program funded out of general funds, which we can do. So I just wanted to make you aware that we are discussing that, and we can definitely facilitate that change with respect to that funding source.
Thank you, Barbara. I think it's probably based on the concerns from Council to at least identify it and have that dollar amount there to show our commitment. And then if staff wants to come back with where they feel that the money can be utilized, that's fine as well. But I think this at least sets the tone that this is what we're willing to do, and as long as it fits within our parameters. And if it doesn't, then we may have to shift to general fund monies. Oh, David Dollahan.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, let me share my video real quick. Natalie and I had an earlier discussion. We're aware of the concerns with Habitat for Humanity. I understand their concerns, and I agree with Councilor Vasquez on the situation with other nonprofits having potential requests. I think we can help Habitat for Humanity through a potential short-term affordable housing program, which is allowed under state law. We would have to work out some specifics, but we could help with mortgage assistance through a short-term rental program that helps them get their operating funds through their mortgage payments. And then at the end of the day, we also get paid back that funding coming back to the city to support future affordable housing projects. And if we're going to do that, I think we need another week or so to work out the specifics on that. And I would encourage that to come from a small amount from the general fund rather than the TELSHOR fund, if that's an option.
Yeah, David, I don't have any problem with that. I think by at least identifying it in today, and then if it gives you a lot of flexibility there, you just come back with the adjustments of where you think it needs to come from and where the money is available. But worst case scenario, it's at least available through our TELSHOR fund. And frankly, I think as long as we stay within the guidelines that are set forth, that Council has just passed as far as the amounts, and if we stay focus on the spirit of what we're doing to help those that are ill, sick, indigent, and so forth, much like what we're doing with some of these other programs, I think that's really what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, these are unprecedented times, and I know it. I want to credit council for their vision and being able to try to figure out how to best help our residents in need. And again, just because we have it identified here doesn't mean you just have to spend it tomorrow. We trust staff will find a way, and if there's a different way that we can do it, yes. And if it's not, at least this is available.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you. So I want to state again that I think we have to be very careful about where our TELSHOR funds are going. And as far as going, addressing the needs of, say, habitat, for example, or whatever, I think that's outside of I think they're wonderful ideas. I think that COVID and this crisis has given us a even stronger awareness of who we are as government to be helping our community, all factors, factions of our community. But I think we're straying a little bit, not staying entirely focused on helping those right now who are in dire need. And, as I said, maybe it's wonderful to be having this conversation about all the wonderful things we can do as a city government and as city councilors setting that policy. But I'd really like to keep our eye on that, on what the purpose is of dishing out all this money. It isn't as if the money has, as if the city has resources, no doubt. It has money, no doubt. But it seems that, and I think it was Councilor Vasquez who said that there will be a lot of agencies or nonprofits who will be coming in asking for money. And there's nothing wrong with asking, but it's our job to make sure that it's not, we're not stretching it. And I just want to I want to caution, or I want to be cautious. I think we need to be. We have an ethical obligation, fiduciary duty to that fund, the TELSHOR fund. So I just want to stress that again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councilors.
Would you prefer that we hold off on that for now and maybe look at the next go around?
Well, certainly what Mr. Dollahan brought up, I don't think it's, he said there's mortgage relief or something that the city can help with. That's certainly, I don't know, depending on the facts of the situation, but I just don't see how helping with, I don't know how that would be connected to the TELSHOR funds that would be released. And part of it is, just protecting the fund as far as what it's for. And I think it's up to the rest of the council to decide whether all of this should be kicked around by staff and by our city attorney and city manager to see whether all the discussions we're having about how to disperse money goes. But I think we're well aware of the foundations that have a clear track record as to where it has gone. So it's up to the rest of the council as to they want all of these things. And you've said, Mr. Mayor, that it's better to look at all of this and see if it flies insofar as the TELSHOR fund monies go. But I just don't want to appear as if we're sitting here trying to stretch things to make sure that everybody who, and I'm not saying, Habitat for Humanity is a wonderful organization. I've supported them for years and years and made wonderful donations to them. So it's not a question of not liking what they do. It's a question of what we must do insofar as the TELSHOR fund is concerned. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Sorg and then Mayor Pro Tem Gondara.
Almost wasn't quite ready, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I've been listening to all that's been saying here, and I have one thing that I'd like to say to tell you how I really feel, and that is that I don't think it's our responsibility to make anyone whole, but on the other hand, maybe we aren't at all. We don't know. We don't know if we're doing something that is out of our lane. We don't know a lot of things when doing this. It seems like we're throwing money here and there, and some we know is going to do the right thing. I'm really appreciative of the Community Foundation that they're keeping the communication going really well. But I still have the strong feeling that everybody's going to have to take on some responsibility and take on some loss. We just don't want any one person or one organization or one business or even one government to be taking on a loss that's disproportionate to everybody else's loss. So it's difficult to determine that, but that's what's guiding me. And for that reason, I concur with Councilor Vasquez, Councilor Flores, their comments on this too. Thank you,
Okay.
Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem? Mayor Pro Tem Gondara?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate all the commentary and respect wholeheartedly what my fellow councilors are indicating about the TELSHOR fund. And I think for the more long-standing folks, Councilor Sorg, myself, you, Mayor, the TELSHOR funding and how it's distributed in the process has been challenged over the years in terms of who we actually give funding to. And I just want to reiterate that we have tried to look, at least in the time that I've been, and this is my second term, at least once, to try to look at revamping that TELSHOR fund in the way by which the money is distributed, because we also hear a lot of complaints about that we only work with a certain amount of nonprofits. And of course, we have the Health and Human Services group that convenes a couple of times a year to look at the various grant opportunities that arise and review those particular proposals. And so, as you know, we've had, or I don't know if others have, but I know that I've received certain complaints. And so this, at some level, to some of our nonprofits, seems like a very huge reach to try to get in on this funding, if you will, and that some of the complaints also are that we give funding to certain groups that have received funding for years and years. And so I think you're right that we will probably have nonprofits that come and ask for funding, and maybe this is a good opportunity to re-examine the process in terms of who we actually give funding to. Maybe it'll start to expand and give other other nonprofits opportunity. And so with that, I also think, and I've been saying this about the microloans and other, is our ability to stimulate our economy in some way. And I also think that Habitat Humanity does assist us in that way. It's I don't know all the ins and outs, and so I made mention of it because everybody received Candace Butler's email, I'm pretty certain, in the last couple of weeks to look at with an attachment in regards to what her proposal looked like. She sent another email to us this week, and her board has started to respond to her email thanking her for reiterating and reminding us the work that they do. And so I know that at one time we had talked about using the TELSHOR fund to expand our housing. So please remember that these folks that we provide this service to are folks that otherwise would not have a home to be in. Habitat Humanity provides a great service to these folks who otherwise might be homeless or still in a rental situation that isn't always the best. And so I really want staff to look at this and re-examine Habitat for Humanity, but also looking at other opportunities where we can stimulate our economy once we get out of this sort of preliminary weeks through April, because this is going to help us increase our GRT. So for example, I've brought up that Community of Hope, Families and Youth Incorporated have land available to maybe build tiny homes on their property so that we can help minimize the homeless population or near homelessness that many of those clients or constituents are facing. And so I feel really strongly that the microloan program and maybe this funding opportunity to Habitat, but also with others in conjunction with our home builders and our providers that do help in the construction industry might assist us in looking at this TELSHOR funding in a different way. So with that, Mayor, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, let me ask you something. If we were to, would you have a problem if we were to, let's say we have our meeting next Friday, the 17th, and that gives time for staff to go back and take a look at what Candace sent and work with them. And then I think David was talking about different monies that might be available and maybe tap into the TELSHOR fund on a smaller amount. Would you have a problem if we were to do that and leave that off until next Friday?
I wouldn't have a problem with that, Mayor. I appreciate a week's worth of looking in. Sure.
Councilor Vasquez, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Gandara for bringing up the future use of the TELSHOR fund and how it really makes our community more healthy and or can make our community more healthy in a variety of different ways, including the adequate housing assistance that we need to really impact our residents who don't have access to that. And so I think we do have to have in the future a discussion about how we best use TELSHOR fund monies to expand beyond the original mission, because it is a great resource that not a lot of cities have. It is something unique to the city of Las Cruces that gives us an opportunity to help our community, and we should be leveraging that to the full extent. With respects to the Habitat proposal, I know part of what they were asking for was reimbursement from the loss of sales from the closing of their restore. And again, that's, to me, they're probably considered a non-essential business, right? Because the restore is a business. And so that's why I just hesitated a little bit, because if the reasoning for asking for some of this money is the closing of a non-essential business, then I could see how it could lead us down a path of other folks wanting us to make their operations or their operational budget whole in light of some of these restrictions that we have today. So I'm happy either way to discuss this at a future time to see if that reimbursement or that assistance comes through another program. Happy to include it in this particular budget modification, and then staff can work with them to see if the disbursement of these funds is appropriate to what we're trying to do in terms of the direct response to help people in crisis at this point. But I think the longer term vision, as Mayor Pro Tem Gandara mentioned, is how do we best leverage this tool that we have to help our community in the future, especially for those organizations that are out there doing amazing work like Habitat and so many others that are helping people get on their feet. So again, don't mind either way, but I think for this particular purpose, I just want to make sure that those funds that we spend from the TELSHOR money now are going to have a direct impact on the people who risk losing their homes, who can't pay rent, who don't have food, who don't have necessities, transportation to get to medical appointments, all those kinds of things that I see as kind of like immediate needs for people in our community as a result of this crisis. But either way, it's a conversation we should be having. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to get to, I'm just going to do a recap of what has been suggested. Oh, Councilor Flores, you have a question?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Whoa.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
One at a time. Put your hand up, please. You raise your hand if you guys have a question. Councilor Flores.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for you. When you speak to the mayor, when you speak to the governor, this bi-weekly type of meeting or bi-monthly that you have, that the mayors have, is there any discussion? I know that Representative Joanne Ferrari was talking about a mortgage relief act or something. And I don't know if she's spoken to the governor directly. I'm sure she has. But I'm just wondering, do you talk about those things in your meetings when you meet with the mayor?
No, they're just talking about the loss of gross receipts, what the impact is going to have on their communities, and it's really disheartening. It's tough to hear that. Let me just share with you something that my perspective here. So our budget, when you take our total budget of the City of Las Cruces, is $400 million when you add utilities and everything. And for us to have $40 million, roughly is 10% to have in that TELSHOR fund, give or take. That's like having New York City, whose budget is $90 billion, having a $9 billion fund that they can use to help. No city has what we have. Mm-hmm. We're extremely fortunate. Mm-hmm. It's tough listening to those mayors in some of those communities. There's one that I don't want to share right now, but they're talking layoffs. I mean, they're like no gross receipts tax. It's really difficult. So that's what I'm listening. So in answer to your question, Councilor Flores, it's not really directed by the state. They're just talking a little bit about, hey, what the feds are going to be looking for, and that's where I heard about the emergency declaration, and how they can get by, how they need they need money just to put money into their operations. This, for those members of the public who are listening, whatever we're spending has zero impact on our operations out there. Zero. I mean, you're not going to see reduction in any of our departments because of what we're spending here. It's just totally separate, and that's why I wanted to put that in perspective. If New York City had what we had, they'd have a $9 billion fund. That's incredible. So,
well, I'm glad that you're sharing that with us. But my question is, there's a bigger picture here, and it seems that the governors of the state would be in a position to address mortgage relief and such things as passing a statute on rent control and things that would alleviate some of the problems that we're having, or a freeze on rent, and then a discussion on how you wouldn't then have a balloon payment at the end of this declared COVID crisis that we're in. And I just wanted to know, it seems like the cities are talking about lack of money, and I was just wondering if there was any discussion as to looking at the state or asking the governor to then talk to the feds about mortgage relief of some sort. I mean, I'm just thinking, I'm just looking at the bigger picture. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Well, and if you want, I'll put my business person's hat on real quick. So let's just say hypothetically, and I hear what you're saying, but let's just say, for example, you have an apartment complex that has 100 tenants, okay, and the landlord is owned by one person, and if that landlord has a mortgage, and the bank calls that in because they can't make that payment because the tenants aren't paying, now you haven't just affected one person, you've affected 100 people who lose their place to live. If that bank comes down and forecloses, everybody leaves. So there's got to be a balance there, Councilor Flores, and I understand what you're saying.
No, I'm talking about mortgage relief. Mortgage relief.
That's a mortgage
No,
on
no,
a
it
apartment complex.
no, the owner would be protected from foreclosing on the mortgage. And they're, they're federally regulated. And, I understand what you're saying about people being out and this, that, and the other. I think my question or my suggestion or whatever you want to call it, my comment was addressing mortgage relief, which is a totally different scenario than what you're addressing.
Now, that is a conversation I think, in my opinion, has to come from our U.S. Congressperson and U.S. Senator, or Congresswoman Sochi, and Congresspeople, Congresswomen and men throughout the United States, how they're helping the small business. If they can direct that to owners of multi-use properties, to that money could be used for their mortgages to be frozen or payments subsided, then I could see that. But if you, by the Supreme Court saying we're freezing all evictions, that doesn't mean that the balances to the banks aren't accruing. They are, and once they release it, the landlord is still going to owe that amount. And so that's where I think if there was one way to focus, in fact, because of this discussion, I'll reach out to Senator Heinrich and Senator Udall and explain that to them. Now, if they could get special monies for those who own these large apartment complexes and get money to them, to those banks that hold those notes, then I could see, by all means, they could get rent free. Because if they're putting a freeze, or if they're making some type of amendment on that mortgage, that's great. I mean, I wouldn't say rent free. I mean, there still has to be a little bit coming in to pay but a significant chunk there, like 80%, could be relieved, in my opinion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's it. That you got it. Thank you.
Okay. So, all right. So let's go over what David, yes.
Actually, Mayor, Stuvie.
Yeah. Did you guys have your hand up?
I've been having my hand up for a while now.
Sorry about this, something that doesn't usually rises to the top here. So I apologize. Go ahead.
That's all right. Most of the commentary has already been sort of hashed out. I was going to make a comment much earlier, thanking Mr. Dallahan for looking into the different ways that we could potentially help Habitat for Humanity, knowing that these mortgages, that if there's anything that we could do with the mortgages for these people, because most likely these are also individuals that are being highly impacted by the current events, and they are going to have lower incomes anyway. So I'm glad to see that happen. But I'm very supportive that we've been taking kind of bold actions and trying to be as proactive as possible to set up our community members in such a way that when this is hopefully is all done, we've left them in the best possible circumstances, that we've helped out in significant and meaningful ways. And I think a lot of the actions that we've been voting upon do just that, helping with housing, food, safety, physical and mental health. And so that's why I've been so supportive of these actions and will continue to do so. So thank you, Mayor.
Yes, and David Maestas, I'm sorry, you had a comment?
Yes, no need to apologize, Mayor. Definitely with these hand-raising things, I can understand how they go back and forth. So I don't want to belabor the point since you're all ready to get to the point for the amendments, but I did want to read a most recent approval that Council did on a resolution that gives the definition for healthcare services with respect to the TELSHOR fund, and then hopefully that will help with the decision-making. In the resolution, it noted that City Council continues to utilize the following definition of healthcare services. The proceeds from a transfer from the TELSHOR Facility Fund or other money shall be dedicated to the health-related public service fund, which shall be used to support the continued physical, mental, developmental, emotional, and social well-being, safety, and housing needs of the City of Las Cruces residents and to improve the lives of sick, indigent, or low-income people of the City of Las Cruces. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And if it's still okay with Mayor Pro Tem Gondara that we hold this for next Friday, by that time it gives staff, and specifically David Dollahan, I think he had something he wanted to work up and maybe be able to work with Candace Butler as to exactly what it is that she was, how we could help, and it'd be more focused on specific things. But I appreciate that reading of that, David.
Yes, Mayor, it's still fine with me.
Okay, so let me just review with you what all I have here so far. So from we have additional amount of from $9,500 to $22,000 for Doña Ana Communities United. From on Cruces Creatives from $9,600 to $21,600, so that's an additional $12,000. On Community Action Agency, currently at $98,000 to $250,000, which is an increase of $152,000. And then Fish and Loaves from $2,500 to $10,000, which is an additional $7,500. All total, that should equal $184,000 in addition to the $500 that we currently have scheduled. So we would need an amendment to go to $684,000 to include those additional increases. Not everybody jump in at one time.
Some of Gabe Vasquez.
Councilor Vasquez, motion.
Cassandra Gondara.
And second by Mayor Pro Tem Gondara. Is there any questions on the amendment? Okay, so Christine, is that going to be good enough for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is for just the amendment, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so looks like we're good to go on the vote.
Okay. This is on the motion to amend Resolution 20-134 to change the budget adjustment to $684,000. Councilor Abeyta-Stevie.
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez.
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo.
Yes.
Councilor Sorg.
Yes.
Councilor Flores.
Yes.
Councilor Gondara.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Okay, so that's been approved, and all total, when you add the $1,072,000 that we did last time, we're up to $1,756,000, which is pretty substantial. Okay, so we have an update on the federal monies due to the city, I believe.
Mayor, we need to call the final.
I'm sorry. just seeing if you were paying attention there.
I'm trying.
Okay.
This is on the motion to approve Resolution 20-134 as amended. Councilor Abeyta-Stevie.
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez.
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo.
Yes.
Councilor Sorg.
Yes.
Councilor Flores.
Yes.
Councilor Gondara.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Okay, now we're going to go to the federal monies awarded to the City of Las Cruces, and I believe Amy Johnson Basford is going to speak.
Yes. Good morning, Mayor and City Council. This is Amy Johnson Basford. I'm the Grants Administrator, and I'm going to share my screen with you here. I want to present to you an overview of the, give me just a moment. Okay, there it is. An overview of the Federal CARES Act, which was passed on March 27th, which provides funding to a multitude of cities, states, agencies, individuals, businesses, and nonprofits. It's an enormous bill, in excess of 900 pages long. And so I'm going to give you the best overview of the information we have as of this moment. And it is changing continuously as agencies work diligently to bring out this funding to municipalities and other organizations in the communities. It does allow the majority of the funding to go back to when the initial disaster proclamation was made by the president for the nation, which is January 20th of 2020. So the majority of funding will go back to that date. So that is a good benefit that they had added to it. The FEMA disaster relief funds, which you've talked about a little bit, the major declaration for New Mexico was made on April 5th of 2020. The emergency declaration you made earlier today helps support this and allows us to access the public assistance funding under Category B. As you will see on the map, the entire state is categorized as receiving Category B funding. FEMA emergency funding is for emergency protective measures. The eligible measures are to respond to the COVID-19 emergency at the direction or guidance of public health officials. These are the items that may be reimbursed. I'll go into some detail on the eligible expenses. This is a 75% reimbursement. We are required to provide 25%. The total provided under the bill is $25 billion, and that is under the T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. Now, the FEMA may choose to add additional categories of reimbursement in the future. And those may include things like assistance to individuals and that type of thing. But for eligible expenses for us as a municipality under this is, Amy, I'm sorry?
Amy, your screen is not sharing properly.
Okay.
Are you in Zoom?
Yes.
Share
Did it not share the screen? Okay, let me go back just a moment. If everybody will be.
It's not sharing, no.
Patient, just a moment. Let me see if I can make it do that again. All right. Nope, it's still not. Okay, so I'm sharing screen. There we go. Okay, are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, Amy, thank you.
Would you like me to go back at all?
Probably wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
Please do.
Okay. All right, let me see if I can figure out how to make it do this for me. Okay. So what I started with was information on the FEMA disaster relief funds that are available to us. And those are the COVID, sorry, I'm trying to make it not move around too much. So under the COVID-19 pandemic for the state of New Mexico, the incident period began on January 20th of 2020. The president did declare New Mexico a major disaster declaration on April 5th of 2020. And the category that FEMA is allowing us to apply under is called Category B, which is protective measures. As I mentioned, FEMA can go back and provide other federal assistance under this declaration, which may include individual assistance that individuals that are damaged by the disaster can apply for. One of the things I want to mention is that FEMA doesn't have their eligibility written for a pandemic. It has been since the Spanish flu in 1918, since we've had a pandemic, and so FEMA is moving their way through this, as are we all. So their Category B is really protective measures to be taken as a response to the let me see if I can get rid of you guys. There we go. Taken as a response to the emergency, which is at the direction of public health officials. Again, this is a 75% cost share. We will be absorbing 25% of this cost, and there was $25 billion provided under the T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. The eligible expenses under Category B, which is the protective measures, is for management, control, and reduction of immediate threats, emergency medical care, medical facilities, when existing facilities are reasonably forecasted to become overloaded, movement of supplies and persons, security and law enforcement, the purchase and distribution of food, including personal protective equipment and hazardous material suits, communications of general health and safety information to the public, search and rescue to locate and recover members of the population, household pet sheltering and containment actions in accordance with CDC guidelines, and reimbursement for state, tribe, territory, and local government force account overtime cost. So it's fairly limited what we can cover here. The responsible department for this is the fire department, and we are at this time reporting back to the New Mexico Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management on our expenses as we begin to submit that through the actual FEMA portal. We will be defining what expenses are actually eligible and not eligible. They will be providing us with more guidance as we move through this. Additionally, in the CARES Act, FEMA is providing assistance to firefighters under that grant program of $100 million, which we can submit an application for personal protective equipment. Those guidelines have not been released as of yet. And additionally, FEMA is providing $200 million under the Emergency Shelter and Food Program. This is the program that we were reimbursed for when we were assisting the asylum seekers in providing sheltering. This program is available to nonprofits in our community that are providing sheltering and food to the community, and they can be reimbursed for the expenses that they are incurring to do that all the way back to January 20th. So I want to make sure you all understand that there are many aspects of this that are available to our community nonprofits, faith organizations, as well as some businesses. Under the FEMA Disaster Recovery Act, some nonprofits can be eligible to apply under the direct disaster relief as well. So that is something that as you talk to the nonprofits that you're working with, that you should mention to them that they should look into for additional support. Let's see. And so that was the main FEMA Relief Act. Under the CARES Act, FTA, which is our Federal Transit Administration, has provided funding as well. There was $25 billion appropriated. Our Las Cruces apportionment is just over $6 million. It allows us to go back to January 20th for all eligible expenses as allowed under our normal operating grant that we receive. It can be used for both capital and operations, and it provides 100% reimbursement with no local cost share. City staff has met multiple times this week. We are in the process of going into the FTA portal and drawing down this money. It should be brought to council in a very short order within the next month, we would expect. And again, it does have pre-award authority for us to go back to cover all expenses of our transit facility, our transit operations. The other great thing about this particular funding is that it will allow us to use transit for things that we had previously not been allowed to expense. Things like using transit to deliver meals and other types of activities that we may be undertaking as a response to the COVID-19 crisis. This money is in addition to our federal fiscal year 2020 apportionment, which is just over $2.1 million. We are able to amend our existing grants that we have with FTA for operations to increase the federal share to 80% from 50% and have only a 20% local match. The responsible department for this particular funding is the Roadrunner Transit and Quality of Life. Additionally, the CARES Act provides some funding from the Department of Justice under the Edward Byrne JAG funds, which is Justice Assistance Grants. It's going to provide an additional apportionment to our police department of $59,622. This must be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. I want to make a note that every section of the bill has that wording in it, the prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. So the intent of these funds are not to do a multitude of things. It's really for us to be responding to this crisis. This funding can be used for the police department to include overtime, equipment, hiring, supplies, training, and travel. They may not be used to supplant state or local funds, nor used to direct administrative cost. There is no match required, and the police department is responsible for this particular funding. The grants office is currently working with staff from the police department to prepare the application for this, and we'll be submitting that within the next month. I believe that it is due early May. And then we have HUD funding, which Natalie Green has provided information to you on previously. We are going to receive an increase to our federal apportionment for federal fiscal year 2020 of just over $560,000. This funding is going to be building on our existing relationships for public facilities and public services. Community development is the responsible department for this funding. The FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration, is providing, was appropriated $10 billion to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. At least 100 million of that has been set aside for general aviation airports such as ours, and that is to ensure continued operation during likely sustained decline in air travel. Those airports receiving grants need to maintain their employment levels of at least 90% as of the date of enactment, which was March 27th of 2020. No matches required on this one. This one, similar to the FTA, will also provide reimbursement for those individuals who are put on leave due to the coronavirus, and that includes people who are not able to work due to the coronavirus because they are not considered essential personnel. So administrative leave, the quarantine leave, those types of things can be reimbursed for our different departments under some of these funding mechanisms. The Economic Development Administration, they were appropriated $1.5 billion in supplemental funding for the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. This program is to assist state and local entities with a wide range of technical, planning, public works, and infrastructure in regions experiencing adverse economic conditions due to the COVID-19 crisis. The grant guidelines have not been released. The Economic Development Department is the responsible department, and we have reached out to EDA to find out when they expect to release their guidelines on accessing this funding. The EDA has just released their guidelines on funding for emergencies that occurred in 2018 and 2019. So we are hoping they're a little quicker with their guidelines for this emergency crisis. Some of the potential EDA activities that we might undertake with this funding is adapting business retention and expansion programs, building a resilient workforce, undertaking efforts to broaden the industrial base with diversification initiatives based on the region's unique assets and competitive strengths, and that provide stability during downturns that disproportionately impact any single cluster or industry. We can also use it for promoting business continuity and preparedness, and identify persistent economic challenges or deficiencies for future crisis. So that one has a wide variety of things we can do with it. The NEA and the NEH, which is the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities, both were appropriated $75 million each to prepare, prevent, and respond. NEA funds can be used for general operating expenses, which is not normally allowed. Both agencies are providing 60% to specific organizations and 40% to other organizations, as shown on the slide. These grant guidelines have not been yet released. We are expecting to see them any day now and determine if we're eligible or not. These do have the caveat that we need to have received awards from them in recent past in order to be eligible for this. So we really need to look at the guidelines very closely to see if we are eligible for this funding. The state relief funds, which I believe have been mentioned multiple times by the council as well as the staff, is $150 billion for the states to prepare, prevent, and respond to the crisis. The apportionment for New Mexico is $125 million. It's this to be dispersed by the state. The minimum state share is $55,000, which is $668,000 for it to take apportionment for themselves and to distribute to small communities. The maximum cap for a direct assistance, which is for populations that have in excess of $500,000, is $45,000. That comes out to $563,000. As we know, there's only one city in New Mexico that has over 500,000. So we don't know if the state will give them that entire amount or if some of that will be redistributed to smaller communities in New Mexico. It does establish a $500 billion lending fund for businesses, cities, and states to help them through the COVID crisis. These guidelines have not been yet released on how this money will be accessed. And there are additional efforts right now at the federal level to add another $250 billion to go directly to smaller municipalities. The grants office is monitoring how that is moving through the federal legislative process to be aware of how we could access some of those funds. Just as a recap, we've provided some information on the individual resources that are available under CARES to individuals in our community. Increases to a multitude of programs have been provided through this CARES Act that include TANF, SNAP, insurance coverages and food distribution, unemployment payments and direct payments to individuals and families, tenant-based rental assistance and low-income home energy assistance, paid sick leave, student loan forbearance, an increase in charitable deductions on your tax return and the tax filing deadline extension. Retirement plan requirements have been waived. There are accommodations for foreclosure, eviction moratorium, and forbearance on federally backed mortgages. And for businesses, through the CARES Act, there are multitudes of things that businesses and nonprofits can apply for to receive direct relief funding. That includes the SBA. Unique to this particular funding from SBA is that it is available to both businesses and nonprofits. I understand that this is a really challenging program that they're trying to push out through the banks, and that additional funding at the federal level is being considered to add to this particular fund. There are several tax-related programs for businesses. There is the New Mexico Economic Development Department that is providing a multitude of programs for businesses, which Dr. Griselda Martinez provided some information about earlier on how they are pushing out information to our local businesses on what is available from NMEDD. And then FEMA, the Emergency Food and Shelter Program. This is available to nonprofits that are providing essential services that they can directly apply for, and they would need to reach out to the United Way of Southern New Mexico to find out how to become eligible for that particular program. That is a very brief recap of what is in this bill and what the city is able to be applying for, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Councillor Abeyta-Stevie.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for such a complete list. I do have one question, Amy. When it comes to our state funding and those allocations, how do we advocate our needs to the governor and everything to try to get the maximum amount for our community? since I know we don't have the 500,000, but we are the second largest city here. So how can we really put our best foot forward and be as proactive as possible?
If I can jump in real quick before that answer. So the Municipal League is looking to draft language to send out because they feel that obviously there's only like, I'm going to guess 30 cities in the United States that probably meet that criteria. So I just want you to know that the Municipal League of Cities is working on being able to draft that and send to the governor to say, hey, you know, there's only one city that qualifies. So I just want to throw that out there. So I didn't mean to interrupt.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor. The information that I've received thus far, and as I mentioned multiple times, it changes rapidly, and we are trying to keep on top of the new information that comes out. But as I understand it, that state funding will be distributed based on the number of cases and the amount of need in the communities. As I said, that criteria has not been released yet, so I believe the governor is still, working through. The governor and her staff are still working through how they will distribute that money. But that is how the initial information that I've received on how it will be distributed.
Thank you. And since this is a historical piece that I don't have, about how long do you think it would take to, once we start applying for these different items, how long does it usually take us to receive those reimbursements or grants?
Yes, so thank you, Mayor, Councilor. Several of them have been very extraordinary in being able to roll these out within 2 weeks from the passage of the CARES Act. So for example, the FTA, that money is available for us to go out and access at this time. And as I said, we are in the process of doing that. Normally an FTA grant will take anywhere from a month to 3 months to move through the federal process once we've accessed it in the federal portal. They are anticipating that will be moved along quickly with the other agencies that have to sign off on it. And so I am expecting it within a month. And again, almost all of these have pre-award authority. So it doesn't really matter when we get the money, we can go back and reimburse, a request for reimbursement for our expenses that we've incurred from the date of the emergency, which was January 20th of 2020. Other agencies are not moving quite as quickly. As I mentioned, the EDA is not moving very quickly, but I think that the federal pressure on those agencies will come to bear, and they will start releasing things quite quickly. We're getting a lot of webinars that we're sitting in on how agencies are going to be considering distributing money, how you can apply for them, how they're expediting the application process.
Thank you. And do we anticipate that we'll be awarded the full amounts for what we're asking for, or do we think there might be a little bit of gaps?
Mayor and Councilor, so at this time, those that are being provided through federal apportionments, that is the amount that we will receive. Those that are requiring applications, again, that might not be fully funded. As with any grant application, there's an opportunity for us not to be funded at all, but then there's the opportunity for them to fund us at a lower amount. So those that require actual applications are a little more suspect on how much we'll get from them, but those that are under the federal apportionment that I discussed early in the presentation, those are the amounts we will be receiving from those agencies.
Okay, thank you so much for everything, the work of your department.
Thank you.
Councilor Sorg, the Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Bassford. I have just a couple questions, but I also wanted to start out by saying that I'm getting messages from the National League of Cities daily on all of this information. And one of the things they're talking about lately is that there's more coming down the pipe through Congress, or trying to be going through Congress. We'll see if they can pass it. I have a question about the CBDG funds. You mentioned a dollar amount. That's in addition to what we normally get for CBDG. Is that amount allowed to be used in the same way as the original amount that we usually get?
Mayor, Councilor, I believe so. The majority of them are allowing for the normal expenses of their programs. But I do have Natalie Green, who is on the call, that could possibly give some more information on anything she's received directly from them. If Natalie could chime in.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Sorg, we are still waiting for that guidance.
Okay.
It will have to be used within the CDBG regulations, so it will have to meet our national objective and have to serve people who are low to moderate income below 80% AMI.
Yes, I know what the purpose is of it. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. The second one is the EAAP funding for small businesses. I just wondered if that's something we could use for our small businesses like we were talking about for, in addition to what the money we have already approved for small businesses in the Economic Development Department.
Mayor, Councilor, I believe that those funds are for businesses to apply for directly.
Okay.
We are getting additional information to help us with that. If there's a mechanism that we could apply for to provide assistance as a pass-through, that is certainly something that the Economic Development Department and I are keeping a close eye on.
Well, I hope that all of our work we do here in the city and their contacts with the businesses in town and everybody else, that we pass this information on, that they can get additional assistance from the federal government in these programs. Okay, one last thing. I thought the state received $1.25 or $1.24 billion in funding directly from the federal government in the CARES Act, whereas the slide you showed was considerably less amounts of money. I don't understand the difference.
Mayor, Councilor Sorg, I can certainly go back and check that, but I believe that New Mexico only got 125 million of that 150 billion, but I can go back and check and provide that information to City Manager to share with you.
Okay. I was told by Senator Heinrich's office that that's how much, or was it Udall? One or the other anyway. That's the amount that the state of New Mexico would get in direct assistance. Okay, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for doing all the hard work you're doing. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we have Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, I thought, had wanted to speak.
Mayor, I was just going to make mention of the National League of Cities. They've been sending, as Councilor Sorg indicated, many emails to us. They had a petition out as it related to the particular bill that was passed at the federal level, encouraging municipalities under that threshold to push to get that as part of the total package. So I'm glad that the Municipal League is working towards that, but I think if we can maybe send a letter as mayor and council to the league and whoever else, our federal delegation, about ensuring that the smaller populous communities get the funding, that would be incredible as well. And again, thank you, Amy and staff, for all the work that you've done. I know there's been numerous webinars and such specifically to address this, and I know how much work you've done thus far, so it doesn't go unnoticed for sure. And Amy, I didn't see the PowerPoint as part of an attachment, although there was a lot of attachments and I could have missed it. Was it there? And if so, I'll go back and make a copy, but if it isn't, can we get a copy of your PowerPoint? I thought it was excellent.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor. Yes, I don't know that it was shared with council in your packet, but certainly it is available to the city manager's office on our SharePoint, and that can be shared with you.
It would be helpful. Thank you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Councilor Sorg, you're finished? You still have your hand up? Okay, well, I think you're finished. Okay, so before we adjourn, let me tell you what I have for our next meeting on April 17th, 2020 at 9:30. The possible award of $60,000 to Habitat for Humanity. the updates on the COVID-19 positive cases, asked to have zip codes included and Doña Ana County identified. Also, whether or not Presbyterian Healthcare has a model of projected cases, COVID-19 county by county, and then the current methods of information dissemination by our communications office and possible other ideas. Sound good? Oh, David, you'd like to say something?
I do, Mayor. Thank you for that. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak before you adjourn. You may have noticed, council may have noticed, and people watching the council session may have noticed that we went through quite a few hiccups for this program. I take responsibility for that, and I want to thank everyone for their patience with that. I also want to thank council for their insight and for their requests and for continuing to ask questions on behalf of our community. And then lastly, I want to thank staff. They have gone through quite a bit of work in such a short amount of time for the number of packets they have put together, the amount of research that they have done, and coming forward to you with innovative opportunities and ideas. So thank you very much to them. And again, thank you to Mayor and Council for all of your support and oversight.
Absolutely. Mayor Pro Tem, you have a question?
I do, Mayor. Just to add to not only do I think that we need to reach out to Presbyterian, but our local partners through the Department of Health, Don Sanchez, our local epidemiologists or others that are looking carefully that could really explain sort of cases and a surge, and if we're prepared, those things I think would be really important. The other is not only looking at Habitat for Humanity, but getting asking staff to look at these other opportunities to increase just the economy. For example, using Community of Hope and FYI to build tiny homes or those kinds of projects that will help us sort of move through this process. And also house people that really need to be housed. So I'd made mention of that land, Mayor, both at the but at Community of Hope that might be used to build on there as a way to increase our GRT during this time.
Okay. Let me get with you after the meeting on that. So I'm just to kind of clarify a few things on that, if that's okay. Okay, so if there's nothing further, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, so is motion made by Councilor Bencomo?
Yes, I finally got one.
And second by Councilor Flores. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Let the record reflect nobody is in disagreement. So we are adjourned, and it's what time is it? 12:35 p.m. Thank you.